Back-to-school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Archaeo Animals, the podcast all about zooarchaeology. I'm your host, Alex Fitzpatrick, and with me as always,
Simona Falanga.
And this is part 2 of a bit of a teeny tiny mini series we were doing, and then we took a little break because, holidays and whatnot. But we're back, and we are going to look at the zooarchaeology of myth and legends. But more specifically, we'll be focusing on Greek mythology. Technically, probably Greco-Roman, because Simona's here. But, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, because I guess this is the podcast about the archaeology of animal bones, except for when it isn't.
Which is most times.
Which is a lot. But yeah, I guess it says Greek mythology this month, which I guess we heavily hinted at on our previous mythology episode, because it's something that, clearly, apparently, I really love, but it's something that Alex actually studied.
Yeah, well, studied is a big word. But we figured, last episode we did Norse mythology, and this episode we would tackle another pretty well-known pantheon of mythical creatures. And who knows, if you like these episodes, let us know on Twitter or whatever, and we'll do another one, because there's a lot of mythologies out there, isn't it? And realistically, we could probably do a whole podcast about them. But hey, we will run out of podcast episode ideas at some point. So we'll go back to the well for that one.
Please, absolutely, just send your suggestions, even the ones that we already covered, because like Norse and Greek, we're probably going to leave out so much stuff, because of course it's a 1-hour format. There's only so much of Greek mythology you can cram into it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And this kind of episode, I'm trying to draw from back in the old days when I was a classical archaeologist for, 4 short years, and then decided that I hate pottery so much. But I did a lot of Greek mythology. That said, I am going to mispronounce every single name in this episode. So my apologies. I'm just bad at pronouncing things. We're all just going to have to get used to that. Anyway, might as well do a very brief review of Greek mythology. Again, like Norse mythology, I think a lot of people know it, even if you're not necessarily culturally close to Greek culture. You kind of get it through osmosis. It's one of those pantheons that is kind of just picked up by pop culture, realistically.
Because there's so many references in literature and pop culture, anything from books, films, anime, just...
Oh, yeah, exactly. Video games, which we won't go down that path because we spent basically a whole year last year doing almost exclusively video game episodes. We're coming back. We're going back to antiquity, baby. So yeah, a brief review of Greek mythology. Like Norse mythology, you have a pantheon of gods and goddesses, as well as your demigods, your demigoddesses, your mortal beings, etc., etc., etc. What?
Yes, again, I think the list will be endless. Just various immortal beings of many shapes and forms.
Yes, and literally in many shapes and forms. So you're ruled by Zeus, the god of thunder, and also the god of being the worst. The man-child trend continues,
We had Odin in the previous one, that again is also like king of the man-children. So, yeah, it makes a very interesting parallel there.
Yeah. Although I would argue Zeus is probably the worst.
I mean, duh.
We won't get too much into it. But other notable deities, you have Ares, the god of war, Hermes, the messenger god, Hades, god of the underworld, Poseidon, god of the sea, Aphrodite, goddess of beauty, Athena, goddess of wisdom. Yeah, those are like the big ones, right?
It goes on. Of course, then you have like all of the Roman equivalents.
Oh, go for it.
Oh,
go for it, Simona.
Right.
Let's go.
Zeus would be Jupiter. Ares is Mars. Hermes, Mercury. Hades, oof.
Pluto,
that's the one. And Poseidon is... No, I'm
Neptune.
blanking. Neptune. Oh, because there is a fountain in my hometown called the Fountain of Neptune, and it's literally...
They're all planets, too. Simona, they're all planets.
Aphrodite is Venus, and Athena again.
What is it? Minerva.
It's Artemis.
Artemis is another Greek goddess. Is it Minerva?
I think so.
And Artemis is Greek, but her equivalent is Diana? Yes?
The goddess of the hunt.
Yeah.
Yeah, Artemis is Diana.
Oh.
Sorry, it's just you I was trying to quickly type for the rest of it, so I think I kind of got them here.
Oh. It's just a disembodied voice spoke. Is that you, Zeus? Just as annoying.
No, it's nothing to do with me.
So I just spaced out there because I was just thinking in my head of how funny it would really be that instead of Ares, we said the god of war was Kratos, and see how much hate mail again.
Right. We promised we wouldn't keep making this a video game podcast. Right? Come on, that's 6 minutes. Come on, you can do better than that.
This is our New Year's resolution, was to not be a video game podcast. Although I'm sure we will be a video game podcast at some point this year.
I have never made any such resolutions.
No, okay.
This was made without my prior agreement.
Simona will make it into a video game podcast. I am trying my best, folks. I am trying my best.
It's the new year. You broaden your horizon. So I thought I'd switch from, like the game where every time Simona mentions the Romans, it'll be, every time Simona makes a video game reference.
Okay. Well, for folks out there playing bingo, you might want to change your space to Simona makes a video game reference for those of you playing along. Anyway.
Obviously, so the brief, it's not even, the entire Greek pantheon that we just mentioned here, because it's a very simplified version of it, as well as many of the gods are, not multifunctional, but, they represented a multitude.
One god, many uses. No.
They represented a multitude of things and embodied various values all into one very petty shell.
No, yeah, same. It's kind of what we talked about with the Norse pantheon as well, is that, we obviously have these very distinct things that we associate with the gods, but it wasn't necessarily just that clean cut. They were often the gods of various things, multiple things, in fact. And of course, especially when we get to Greek mythology, you had cults, the mysteries, things like that. So you had other kind of offset gods, and you had different cults of gods, which would look at gods slightly differently. It gets very confusing. I feel like at some point, some gods were subsumed into other gods over time. And speaking of time, one of the interesting things about Greek mythology, and this is something we've talked about in our last mini-series when we covered the zooarchaeology of different time periods and ages, is that Greek mythology is actually broken up into different mythological ages by Hesiod. So you have the Golden Age, which Cronus is kind of the original ruler of the universe. Humans freely mingle with deities.
Yeah, I guess FYI, like Cronus is meant to be a Titan?
Yes.
Well, which the Jotun. Oh, parallels.
Yeah.
Anyway, carry on.
You have the Silver Age. Cronus falls to Zeus. Humans are destroyed by Zeus for not worshipping the deities. that sounds familiar as well, doesn't it, sometimes to other things. The Bronze Age, violent warrior humans are fighting amongst each other. Then you have the Heroic Age, the period where most of the kind of hero stories occur. So the stories at Thebes, the stories of Troy, all those kind of other mythological legends that we know about who aren't necessarily gods. Their stories take place at this point. And then you have the Iron Age, which is kind of the modern age of, modern for the time, age where these stories are being told and the deities have forsaken humans. So that's nice.
Just like they're just so done. Just like, I'm not going to bother with these guys anymore.
Yeah, I get it. I don't blame them, I guess, in some ways. But it's interesting. I love that it's broken down into different time periods. It's that concept of time period being something so old as well. Obviously, we still do it to the point that, we use that kind of terminology like Bronze Age and Iron Age in our own archaeological work.
Though unrelated, but it's only just occurred to me that we missed out my favourite god, Hephaestus.
Oh, of course. I was actually thinking about that. I was like, we could have done
Which I had to look him up because I said, how do you pronounce that in English? So I had to Google that. I was like, okay, well, that's how you call him.
Hephaestus.
That one.
Wait, Hephaestus?
Is that...
Or am I saying it now differently? Am I saying... I thought it was Hephaestus always.
I always heard it as Hephaestus.
Tomato, indeed.
I'm American, so, we all pronounce things differently.
I'm a non-native speaker. To me, it's Epheso. So... But God of Fire lives in a volcano. Yeah.
Vulcan, I think, in the Roman? Yes.
How very original.
I got something out of my classical archaeology degree. I remember the mythology stuff and I don't remember anything else.
How about, mythology depicted on pottery?
Oh, don't even get me started. I don't know if I ever told this story on the podcast, but there was a day where I really realized I didn't want to do classical archaeology. And we were sat in lecture and the professor was going on and on about pottery. I just kind of said out loud, I hate pottery. Just I couldn't take it anymore. And my professor was like, I wrote this book that we're talking about on pottery. And I was just like, I hate your book. I was a fun student.
Yeah, I've actually done this as well, but with geoarchaeology. I was like, I didn't really think much of geoarchaeology when I started, and I still don't at the moment. And literally the lecturer for geoarchaeology is standing behind me, and I'm just like, it could get better.
Did you say geoarchaeology?
Yeah, soil stuff.
Oh, okay. I couldn't understand for a second.
Geoarchaeology, the archaeology of geos.
Hot take. I also found that boring. For some reason, most of my friends at my master's program were doing geoarchaeology.
It wasn't fascinating.
Yeah. Much love to those people who do that.
Guess what? Would it cover soil formation processes and all that jazz?
Yeah, something like that. It's all that physics stuff. I don't understand it. I don't know anything.
Hashtag I don't know anything.
Hashtag I don't know anything. It's truly the kind of, thesis of this podcast. But yeah, no, like Norse mythology, Greek mythology has a lot of intermingling with deities turning into different things, different people being turned into different things. So there's a lot to talk about with regards to kind of the zooarchaeology of the Greek mythologies. There's a lot of different creatures, but I think the fun thing about these creatures is that for the most part, a lot of them are just hybrids.
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. Well, because also you do tend to have a lot of intermingling of god between gods and mortals, gods and various animals, mortals and various animals,
and people with various trees and
trees as well.
Yeah, that's a big one. Lots of things turning into different things. I believe Zeus once turned into like a cloud or something.
As you do.
something extremely ridiculous like that. There's a lot of that going on there. And I think we'll get into it once we get to our next part of the episode. But I think one thing that's also really interesting is that a lot of these kind of creatures are probably descriptions of actual animals that people found as they, obviously the Greeks traveled outwards and may have ran into different creatures that are not native to Greece. So it's interesting to kind of see the mythological creatures that were probably just like some person ran into a weird looking snake.
Yeah, because I guess and then also through sort of, well, not quite gossip, but then someone goes somewhere like really far away out on a voyage. They see something. And then they tell the tale when they come back. And then that person tells it to someone else, and then someone else, and then someone else. And then it turns out being something this wildly just odd-looking monster, I think, and that it was probably just some animal. Or like, oh, I found a weird bone, and then just create a whole mythology based on that bone, which is what we do, I guess.
Yeah, and to be fair, I believe at some point down the line, we may do a full episode on those kind of stories, because I think it kind of ties into the zooarchaeological idea of how we find these bones, we look at these bones, especially creatures that are extinct, and we kind of think about the way they were when they were living. These people, of course, did it to an extent that's a bit more mythological and fantastical, but
Well, because I think about how like our scientific illustration has changed over the last century. So like see like how the dinosaurs were depicted at the turn of the century versus now.
Yeah, they're just birds.
Pretty much.
All right. Well, I think we will take a break. We will ruminate on the things that we just discussed, those hard-hitting things, and we'll start looking at some of these classic mythical creatures.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Back to school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.
And we're back for part 2 of this month's episode of Archaeoanimals, and we're discussing some classical mythical creatures.
Classical Greek mythical creatures, obviously.
Greco-Roman.
Yeah. Ooh, fancy.
So yeah, again, a lot of these, most people will have heard of them already because, again, they've slipped into so much sort of pop culture. There is books, literature, films, just you name it. But we're just going to talk a little bit more about them and figure out how their skeletal anatomy would work. Not well, is the spoiler.
Yeah, I mean, so we're going to start looking at, or first look at some of the classical kind of mythical creatures that most people know from Greek mythology, starting with, I would argue, the most famous of the mythical creatures, which is Cerberus, which is your classic 3-headed dog, traditionally at least. Oddly enough, the number of heads often changed and was also the 12th labor of Heracles.
I mean, the more heads, the merrier. I mean, like it's a dog, isn't it? Just more heads to pat. Except he probably wouldn't let you.
No, I mean, one of the things about Cerberus is that it's probably one of the most well-known because we have so much art from the Greek periods of just depicting Cerberus. It's archaeologically a favorite for pottery art as much as I hate pottery, particularly in the 6th century BC, and had some of the wildest kind of depictions.
I think Hesiod claimed he had 50 heads. Then
Yep.
Pindar gave him, why not 100? It has 100 now. And Euripides gave him 3 bodies as well, which we kind of pretty sure that just makes 3 dogs. And Virgil gave him multiple backs.
Don't know what that means.
I mean, I'm lost.
A peek behind the curtain for folks listening. I literally wrote in the show notes, Virgil gave him multiple backs. Let's try and figure out what that means, because what?
Yeah, also you're missing the crucial what? 3 question marks.
Yeah, I read that. I had to read that a couple times. I couldn't find any images. No one I guess everyone else was like, Virgil, what do you mean? I can't put that on our pottery. I don't know what you mean by multiple backs.
Could it be like 3 backsides? So maybe it's got one, I guess, I don't know, like three pelvises, like the vertebrae, like the spine column, then just splits into 3, and it's got like 3 hips and butts.
What I thought after a while was, I was like, maybe he means like humps.
Oh.
Which I'm kind of like, oh, did someone just see a camel?
Like with a dog's head?
There are some dog breeds that have like humps and ridges, like a Rhodesian Ridgeback.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty sure they but it's just like the spine, the way it is. I mean, 100 is a bit over the top. Like, I feel like if there's something tasty on the ground, my dog has like 100 heads, like, because he's so quick at picking it up. It's almost as if like there's 100 dogs there. So I don't know, maybe it was tongue in cheek. We treated it like it's super serious, but it could be just like, I can't get my dog to listen to me, and if he sees something on the ground, he has to eat it. I mean, it's like he's got 100 heads, and Euripides is like, oh yeah, that's great. I just write that down. It's a really good turn of phrase, and then we're like picking it apart. Just saying, it could be humor.
I mean, there's probably like a whole thesis that can be done of just humor in the archaeological record, and I would probably missed a bunch of it.
Yeah.
Much like people doing things just because. Sometimes it's not a fertility ritual. Sometimes someone has done that painting or whatever just because they could.
It's something they thought it was cool, and that's why they did it. And yeah, I mean, it could be, but it's less about whether or not this is like not factually correct, but like super serious, and more of the fact that I just want to figure out what Euripides meant when he said that Cerberus had 3 heads and 3 bodies. Because again, isn't that just 3 dogs?
Maybe it's a dog that's wagging his head so violently because he's so happy that it looks like it's got like 3 bodies as well.
Yeah, and I mean, the funny thing is, obviously, and this is something that we'll talk about in some of the other examples, I think, but, there are cases of animals being born with 2 heads and things like that. And some people have put forth the idea that some of these mythical creatures could have come from, someone seeing one of those kind of unusual animals. So who knows? Maybe a dog was born with 50 heads somewhere.
I mean, maybe. Yeah, could be that. Or humour, or literally like Virgil wrote that saying, we'll see if anyone buys it. Because they'll believe me, because I'm Virgil.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Virgil. Anyway, we will move on to the next one. Another pretty famous example of Greek mythological creatures. Most people refer to them as Cyclops, but technically it's not just one. It's a group of many-eyed giants. So Cyclopes, multiple Cyclops.
There are many one-eyed giants in Greek mythology.
Yeah.
Actually, probably the most well-known being Polyphemus.
Yeah.
In the as seen in the Odyssey. Do you remember, like, interesting fact, although probably not, we have a grotto of Polyphemus in a village or small town not far from where I'm originally from.
Oh, is that not far from you? Because I studied that when I was in uni.
Yeah, because there's one, like, I don't know whether it's always been called that, and I guess one of the variations of the myth has Polyphemus residing in that cave.
Yeah.
Though really, I think if you look at the Odyssey, like, they just land on an island of giants altogether.
Yeah.
Unless they mean to say that Sicily's an island of giants, which I'm 5'4", no.
I assume it's kind of one of those things where there's a lot of local variations on the myth, where it might be locally they said, yeah, that it was actually here in this grotto. But again, from what I remember, it may have also been like a later thing, because obviously you had the Romanization of a lot of Greek mythology. So a lot of that kind of, what's the word? Kind of using that aesthetics and things like that to liven up parts of, Rome. And
yes, I don't know when that grotto, well, that cave was named like the sort of the Polyphemus cave, in all fairness, because of course we did get Romanized, though to an extent, like less than we did stay pretty Greek throughout. But yeah, no, it's just a bit, and there you go.
No, but I love that because, like I said, I like really remember studying that a lot. Not even vaguely, I do remember studying that. It was one of the things I actually liked about my degree. But yeah, going back to Cyclops, we're talking about them more generally. Probably the most well-known example or potential example of a myth being inspired by animal remains. Again, potentially, one of the kind of origins of the myth that people have posited is that Greeks may have stumbled upon skulls of Pleistocene dwarf elephants and interpreted them as the skulls of one-eyed giants, where they mistook the nasal cavity, which is kind of, almost dead center of the skull, as a eye socket. And an additional theory is that the appearance of congenital disorder called cyclopia, in which fetuses have only one eye in the center of the forehead, may have led to the myth, kind of going back to what we were talking about with Cerberus. So kind of a lot of interesting potential origins for the myth.
Yeah, because again, one of the really interesting things about mythology is the thought process. So, okay, there's this fantastical creature, but what I want to know is that how did that even come into your head? Saying, yeah, there is this creature, yeah, it looks like this, but what's the thought process? How did that come to be? Did you just make that up? What was your thought process? What were you thinking?
Yeah, it's weird to think about now. We're so far ahead of when these mythologies were originally, orally spread. So it's hard to imagine what it was like to come up with those things, because nowadays a lot of what we consume as kind of fantasy or fiction are based off of these original tropes. And then realistically speaking, these mythological creatures, some of them may have had origins even older that were passed down that we can't even find evidence for to learn ourselves.
Yeah, because of course we can only talk about things for which we have either an oral or written record.
Exactly.
The further you go back into prehistory, don't know. I mean, like, usually sort of like the Roman gods sort of get, well, not quite mocked, but made light of, because it's sort of like it's almost a carbon copy of the Greek pantheon. But who's to say that the Greek pantheon is actually a carbon copy of some other mythology that was there before that we don't know much about because there's no written record?
Yeah, I mean, there's already kind of those through lines when you look at the Mycenaeans and the Minoans and things like that, and even farther than before that as well, that kind of get picked up into specific gods and goddesses. But again, time is very long and we can only know such a small portion of it. And if you think too much about it, it hurts your head. So let's move on to the next one instead, which is the chimera, which is kind of just like a word we use these days to refer to most, hybrid-y type creatures.
Yeah, just like a mix of two or more just animals.
Yeah, so they're made up of various animals in Greek mythology, specifically from Lycia, which is Asia Minor. Nowadays, it's, like I said, it's a term that is used to refer to any kind of hybrid, but according to the likes of Homer and Hesiod, it had 3 heads, lion in the front, fire-breathing goat in the middle, serpent in the back, and yes, I do mean that the lion head was in the normal head spot, the goat head kind of popped out of the torso, and instead of a tail, a serpent head came out of the butt.
Oh, okay.
keep us on our toes. They're like, okay, we'll have a 3-headed creature. And then people are like, hey, you did that last week. You said that Cerberus had 3 heads. That's boring. And then they were like, you know what? Fine. There's 1 head in the normal spot. And then in the back is another head. And then out the butt is another head. They're happy. That's exactly what happened.
And the goat breathes fire.
Oh, yeah, of course. I completely need to emphasize that. The goat breathes fire. It's not just that there's a goat coming out of the back. It breathes fire.
Okay, so that is actually very, very useful to get yourself a bite to eat. Because if something comes by and you want to eat it, so the goat just both kills it and roasts it at the same time for then the lion to eat. But then if any scavengers are sneaking up on you from the back, the serpent bites them. And hopefully it's poisonous. Or if not, you're just going to really hurt and they'll run away anyway. So actually, no, that's apex predator.
I think what I'm very curious about is that serpents, reptiles, bone structure-wise, are so different. At least, in terms of kind of the bone, like I said, the bone structure is very different to mammalian skeletons. So I'm very curious at how that kind of works out. If you go from a lion to a goat and then a snake.
Then also not necessarily a department, but in terms of organs, how does that work?
There's a lot going on there. It's just jumbled about, just kind of rolls about. This one might be a bit impossible to kind of work out anatomically. The goat shoots out fire. I don't know what else to say.
Cool. And the last one we've got here is I won't be able to pronounce it, the Cerastes.
Yeah, Cerastes, if you're doing that hard C or not.
So it's not entirely a hybrid, because it's a serpent that was so flexible it was said to not have a backbone at all and had 2 to 4 ram's horns on its head. Wait, a serpent with no backbone? So just a flimsy snake just flopping.
I mean, I get it. I think people who aren't necessarily as informed about anatomy and things like that could say oh, it must not have a vertebra because of how flexible they are.
They're just a floppy snake with horns.
Yeah, as you do.
I can see that because I'm not very knowledgeable on just reptile species, but I think there are some snakes that have some protrusions. That they're not quite horns and then definitely not goat-like horns.
It's funny you should say that, Simona, because it is widely believed that this mythological creature came from experiences with what is now known as the Saharan horned viper. And the scientific name is actually named after the myth Cerastes. I can't pronounce that. I'm so sorry. Again, reptile people, so sorry. Greek people, so sorry. Greek gods, so sorry. Anyone else?
Don't apologize to Zeus.
Zeus, not sorry.
No.
Saharan horned viper, very sorry. I love snakes. Oddly enough. Hate fish, love snakes.
We're just dropping truth bombs everywhere.
This is a very heavy episode for truth.
Yeah,
and with that,
the truth. Oh, do you mean that a lot of the mythologies have sort of parallels? Oh,
blow your mind.
No one's heard that theory before.
Yeah. Anyway, while everyone ruminates on that, we are going to take a break and we will come back and talk about the other hybrids. That's right, human creature hybrids, baby.
We're ruminating a lot this episode.
Yeah.
A lot of rumination.
My head hurts.
Cattle-human hybrid.
Oh no. And we are back with Archaeoanimals. We're talking about the zooarchaeology of myths and legends, specifically about the Greek mythology. And we are going to tackle some human creature hybrids because, how do they work? I don't know. No one knows, apparently.
Except for Virgil. He knows.
Virgil knows, and he mocks us by telling us, oh, he's got 3 backs or whatever. Okay, Virgil, whatever you say. Anyway, we'll tackle yet another pretty famous hybrid creature, the Minotaur. Head and tail of a bull, but the body of a man. Also, a creature in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. There, see, I did a video game reference too. Whatever. New year, same me. You'll just have to deal with it.
However, in certain medieval depictions, based on Ovid's text, the Minotaur is shown like a centaur in that he had the head of a human on a bull's body. That's terrifying.
Ooh, boring.
Terrifying. Imagine you're walking like, I don't know, you're trying to go home at night and then just a bull with a human face stares back. Oh, no.
Yeah, but then again, like thinking about the classical Minotaur, like wouldn't it be top heavy? You got that big old bull head on a weak human vertebrae.
But they didn't say, wasn't it a human's head on a bull's body?
Oh yeah, that one. But I'm just like talking about not an actual. There is no Minotaur, but like what we all kind of assume.
Or is it? Oh, truth bombs.
Well, they're not telling us about them. But like that's the thing though, is like obviously, I mean, our heads are heavy, but like a bull's head, especially a giant bull's head, is extremely heavy, like a skull, and you'd have it sitting on top because the Minotaur walks on two legs. You know, he's upright. He's bipedal. I don't know. You'd have to have a very strong.
Just one big chunky atlas.
Yes.
After big chunky toes, here comes big chunky atlas.
I always like the atlas. I don't know.
It's like a butterfly.
It is like a butterfly. I'm always very pleased when I find one. I'm just like, look at that. That's an atlas.
FYI, the atlas is the first sort of vertebra that connects your skull to the rest of the spine.
Yeah, it's like the one vertebra that I can like actually name, and then the rest are just called vertebra.
I guess because you have the atlas, the axis, then it goes your cervical, thoracic, and lumbar.
Yeah, but there's some zooarchaeologists and bioarchaeologists out there who can like, especially bioarchaeologists, who, like everyone who works with humans, they can like tell you what number of vertebra it is, and I'm like, that's a level I will never get to.
I mean, I guess you could with animals, but then, like, because when you tend to work with so many different species,
Yeah.
No.
I think you can, like I would probably ballpark it, because obviously, especially with some animals, the vertebra get smaller as you go down the tail.
Oh, yeah, and the caudal vertebrae, just thinking humans, and I forgot about the tail ones.
Yeah. But, like, especially humans, I mean, a lot of times me trying to do human bone labs and just completely falling apart when it came to the ribs and the vertebra.
Just because vertebrae and ribs were there to anger bone people.
Yes, they were. You just throw them away. You don't need them.
Please don't throw them away.
No, you throw them away. What are you talking about, Simona? That's my hard stance on vertebra and ribs.
Go and Alex Fitzpatrick, like, revolutionizes discard policies.
Dr. Alex Fitzpatrick, those cowards gave me a PhD, and now I can say these things with full, actual professional knowledge. Throw them away. Anyway,
Okay,
Minotaurs.
Back to a professional discussion on how can a human balance a bull's head.
Well, yeah, I guess realistically speaking, though, your whole body would be structured differently. I guess we're not really talking about a weird kind of mad scientist type thing where they're just taking a human body and just plopping a bull head on it. Like, Minotaurs are usually depicted as like big beefy dudes, big beefy bulls.
No.
Oh dear.
I misheard that.
Anyway, so let's move on to the next one.
Harpies. Harpies. So our good old friend Ovid, there's a lot of Ovid today, and not as in sheep type thing. Ovid, the scholar, called them the human vultures. They're traditionally depicted as having the faces of human women on bird bodies. Now, again, you must have heard of these like countless times and all sorts of mediums, including video games.
Yeah. And interestingly, Greek writers tend to describe them as very beautiful, while Roman and Byzantine writers emphasize their ugliness, which I would love to understand kind of the cultural shift in that. Because I knew that their depictions varied. I didn't realize that it tends to have been Greek writers who wrote them as very beautiful, and then it shifted as Roman writers.
There has been a shift. Not just the appearance, but I guess just the conception of it, because harpy, I mean, not so much, maybe not in English, I'm not sure, but calling someone a harpy is not very nice.
Oh, no, yeah.
So it's usually like someone who's usually a woman that is just nasty or not very pleasant.
Which I guess is picked up more from that Romanization, the Byzantine writers writing about harpies. But yeah, it's interesting that they used to be just extremely beautiful women who were also birds. And apparently it also varies on how bird-like they are in depiction. Some depictions literally just look like a normal bird with a lady's head, which Google image search that. They're extremely funny. And others actually turn from human to bird with breasts, obviously, because men were drawing them for the most part.
To me, though, the depiction of like the bird with the lady's head, like it's so medieval illuminated manuscript.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm picturing them in that style specifically.
It's incredible. I love it so much. But yeah, no, it is interesting. And again, it's something we kind of talked about at the start of this episode, the shifting of mythological creatures and mythological figures over time. And this goes into the creatures as well in terms of the way they're described. And I'm sure someone's done research, and I apologize that I didn't pick it up on it, on, you know, why that is, why some writers tend to bring out the humanity of some of these creatures while others emphasize the more bestial part. And some of them just want a lady head on a bird.
It's a Tuesday afternoon. On Tuesdays, the rest of me turns into a bird, except for my face.
Big mood.
Yeah.
I mean, should we go to the next one, or is there anything else you want to say about harpies?
Just the satyrs.
Satyrs.
Satyr.
You said that like, you know, when you go on YouTube and you look up pronunciation?
Satyr.
Thank you.
Fitzpatrick.
Thank you.
Lesson number 1. Listen and repeat.
Wow, if the podcasting producer thing doesn't work out for you, you've got a job right there, probably.
Hephaestus. Artemis. Diana. There you go.
Chunky toes.
Chunky toes.
Satyrs were originally depicted as human horn. Oh no.
I'm sorry, continue.
You tell us about Greek mythological creatures then.
I'm a detriment to this podcast. I recognize that, and I am truly sorry. I interrupted you, Simona. That was rude. I apologize. Please.
All of our podcast episodes are made in spite of Tristan, not because of him.
Oh dear. Right, come on. Let's get back on track, says the person who took us off track.
Oh, he muted himself. Oh, snap. So yeah, the satyrs were originally depicted as humanoids with horse legs and tail, while later depictions would show them as much more human with appropriate legs. So again, we see that shift.
Yeah.
Appropriate legs, sorry.
Human appropriate legs. Again, I wrote these show notes, so I don't know what I was thinking at the time. So yes, human appropriate legs.
We're giving the satyrs such unrealistic standards of beauty.
I'm so sorry. Apologies to satyrs out there. So yeah, they would get more humanoid, but also at the same time kind of more goat-like. As time progressed, they seem to have been just conflated with Pan, and sometimes we're given the legs and horns of a goat. See, that's what I mean by appropriate legs. They had goat legs, not human appropriate legs.
Yeah. So I guess the questions here is, how did they stand upright with horse/goat legs? And how did they stand upright with the amount of wine they drink?
These are very important questions.
Especially the latter.
Yes, the latter. I mean, I don't think they really stood upright most of the time, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, because obviously you can go upright on the legs of a horse or goat, quadruped type of legs. But
Really not the most stable, because it's the equivalent of being on your tiptoes.
yeah, and I guess in some way we kind of know the answer to this because they made that line, the Witch in the Wardrobe movie with Mr. Tumnus, and they had to give him goat legs.
Oh, I've not read or seen that.
Oh, it's James McAvoy, and he has goat legs, and I believe they have a special rig so that they do that kind of they're not necessarily bent backwards, but you know how goat legs, hind legs, kind of have that look about them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because they almost look like they're bent backwards. So of course, it's due to the morphology of the animal, where essentially, they stand on their tiptoes.
Yeah.
So what you see as bending backwards is actually the wrist joint, if you will, or the ankle joint.
Yeah, so for those kind of looks, they build a little rig that makes that look. But realistically speaking, it is very different to how, say, a human or other bipedal creatures would stand. And I know there's also, I've seen loads of, because obviously Greek mythology, as we said, very popular in pop culture. I've seen make costumes of these creatures, and I've also seen kind of the way they've built those legs. So I guess technically it is possible. It takes some engineering, some very specific type of engineering.
It just doesn't seem very stable.
No, I mean, from what I understand, it's a lot of either you have to build in those supports externally, or almost stilt type of things, or you're just, very talented.
And I guess the satyrs must have been very talented indeed, because they're standing in a position that's not the most stable to begin with, and are also very drunk a lot of the time.
It's very impressive.
It's just a recipe just for, disaster. Oh no, I mean.
Speaking of kind of horse legs, we can hit our very last human creature hybrid that we wanted to talk about, and those are centaurs. Half man on top, half horse on the bottom. Doesn't get much simpler than that. One of the theories behind the origin of the centaurs is that it comes from the perspective of peoples without a riding culture, witnessing horse riders for the first time, which I think is extremely cool.
Well, I guess them dissing, because in truth they were jealous because they didn't have such a good relationship with their horses, or
Exactly.
You'd be like, oh, those people, they're on their horses all the time. It's like they're glued to them. It's like they're one thing.
And then someone else is like, what's glue?
No idea. No idea.
And they killed that man because he was speaking nonsense. More importantly, though, we talked about anatomy. We've talked about kind of cultural shifts. We've talked about a lot of very important big themes in archaeology. But now we are going to hit the most important theme we've ever covered in this entire podcast. And that is, how would a centaur wear trousers? Boop, 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 boop.
What
Simona,
would you
thoughts?
say?
Depends on the trousers, I feel like. Would you stretch them out?
What if you had little dungarees as well?
I feel like dungarees would work better. You can just have them on the bottom half, and then have the straps over. I mean, it would still be very long.
That'd be one strange ill-fitting dungaree.
I mean, I guess it would depend on what the purpose of the centaurs are normally just not wearing anything, so it's not necessarily a decency thing.
So I guess what would you wear them for? To shield yourself from the cold? So you'd want them all the way, I guess, to where the man begins, so to the...
You just wear a big jumpsuit, basically. Right? I don't know. I mean, yeah. Because even if you wore them on just the front legs, you would need the back open.
Okay, where would the zipper go?
Yeah, okay.
Would the zipper go like in the front, on the front? No, the zipper has to go underneath because anatomically, I'm assuming underneath is a horse, right? So
yeah.
I think the zipper would get in the way. So
it has buttons, actually.
I think this might be possibly the reason why many centaurs in media are not shown with trousers on. I think most of them are naked, if I remember correctly.
I think once we figure out the answer to this, we will all reach a certain level of enlightenment that will solve a lot of other problems. That's my hot take.
Mm-hmm. I think we will have hopefully solved other things before that point so that we can free up them thinking time for this very important situation.
Anyway, if you have thoughts about the Great Centaur debate, let us know, because it's the end of the episode. So now we have to start talking about places you can find us.
But just one thing I'd add, though, because we've had fan art before, please don't just tell us our centaur should wear trousers, but also show us our centaur.
Where does that zipper go, folks? Hashtag, I don't know. I was so confident that
show us the zipper.
Hashtag show us the zipper. Let us know where the zipper
is. Please. I don't want that hashtag. Just show us the trousers. Oh no, it's not good. No, I think we've backed ourselves in a corner here. Hashtag centaur fashion. Centaur fashion.
You can send zipper pics to my direct messages.
The style of the centauri.
Oh dear.
Right, abandoned ship. It's over. We can't recover from this. So where can people find us?
Find us on Twitter at ArchaeoAnimals. You can find us on the internet at archaeologypodcastnetworks.com/animals. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and obviously you did find us because you're listening to us. So in that case, tell your friends about us, like and subscribe, leave us a review, and yeah, where would the zipper go? Hashtag show us the zipper. These people are cowards. I'm not. So
it doesn't have a zipper. It's got buttons.
What? I think that's even worse. That takes ages. Zippers are superior to buttons, okay?
What if they get stuck?
Jokes.
In a very uncomfortable position.
What if
Jokes on you. I'm
stuck?
Team Elastics. Team Elastics all the way, baby.
Should a centaur wear tracksuit bottoms instead?
Oh, like a centaur in trackies. Yeah, no, I can see that.
Yeah, just loving to lounge.
God, I wish my Greek knowledge and mythology knowledge was better. That kind of make some sort of Adidas joke, There was actually a joke. It's one of my favorite ones. A man comes into a Greek tailor, and he shows him his jeans. And they're definitely broken. They definitely need repaired. And the Greek tailor says to the man, "Euripides?" And he says, "Yeah." "Eumenides?"
No.
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 I love it. It's so good.
Thank you all for listening to our last episode of ArchaeoAnimals. And that's a wrap. We'll see you next time. Yes. Or not.
Apologies to all the people from Greece.
Apologies to everyone. We're sorry.
Thank you for listening to ArchaeoAnimals. Please subscribe and rate the podcast wherever you get your podcast from. You can find us on Twitter at ArchaeoAnimals. Also, the views expressed on the podcast are those of ourselves, the hosts and guests, and do not necessarily represent those of our institution, employers, and the Archaeology Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Laura Johnson.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.